I miss my grandmother. My child, nearly 2 years old, has her coppery red curls, her seriousness, and her scowl. He is the red-headed grandchild that she always wanted. I wonder what she would make of him, vibrant little doppelganger that he is. She died 29 years ago. I was almost 10, and though young, I had collected the most memories with her out of all of my grandparents. She was a widow by the time I came along, and I was the youngest of her 5 grandchildren. She made sure that we had one-on-one time together on a regular basis, running errands, baking cookies, swimming in her pool, spending time in her rose garden with her tremendous Doberman pinscher, Penny. I later learned that Penny was not only a devoted pet, but a bona fide guard dog with a special Hebrew word that would turn her into a weapon in an instant. I think of Grammy Souther more and more these days. I am often transported to her hunter green and white tiled kitchen, where we spent so much time together. She was not an effusive or even an affectionate person, but she made me feel loved and safe and seen, and I miss her. Psychiatrist Pauline Boss coined the term ambiguous loss after the Vietnam War to describe the grief felt by families of soldiers who had gone missing in action. Her research later expanded to explore the grief of psychological loss, of those still living but no longer mentally present. In a recent interview for the podcast On Being with Krista Tippett, Boss explains that after half a year of this pandemic, we are all dealing with ambiguous loss. To be sure, the death of my grandmother was not ambiguous. I saw her in her deathbed, laid her remains to rest, surrounded by loving friends and family, and said goodbye to that beloved Doberman. To be sure, we have all suffered specific losses this year, as loved ones have left us with holes in our hearts. But when Boss refers to the loss that we are all experiencing, she says that flashes of personal grief are signs of the loss that is so universal this year. We feel our old losses more keenly now, even those in the far rear view, because we have lost and continue to lose so much on a daily basis. With the number of COVID-19 cases soaring past 5 million in the United States, we all know someone who is affected by the virus. And chances are, we know someone who is grieving because of it. Each and every loss is painful. We have all lost our daily freedoms to move about the world as we please, to celebrate milestones together, even to hug our loved ones. The grief is palpable. And yet our culture of mastery requires that we respond to the question, "How are you?" with a "Fine, thanks. How are you?" We avoid talking about our grief because it is painful, because we don't want to burden others, and most disconcertingly, because American culture doesn't want us to talk about it. We live in a society that deems extended periods of grief as signs of weakness, a culture that craves closure and moving on. But closure isn't always possible, and it isn't always preferable. We are lucky inheritors of this tradition of Yizkor and the practice of Yahrzeit, for in them we are given containers into which we can pour our grief. We know when they approach. We feel them before our brain acknowledges their arrival. They give us a designated time and place in which to feel our grief, not to hide from it, or brush it under the rug, or pretend it isn't there. Grief, like any other emotion, will only find more pernicious ways of escaping us if we try to hold it too tightly. Dr. Boss assures us that grief is good, not in and of itself, but it is important. It is important to feel, period. Mourning a recent loss, I texted a trusted colleague to process the deep sea of emotions I was feeling. As I tried to name them and tame them, he quickly replied, "They're just emotions. Feel them. Cry." This is the message of Yizkor. Grief is important. Don't think about it too much. Just feel the feelings. Let them out. Do not hold them in. They will only hurt you. Yizkor is a moment of specific memory, an opportunity to list all of the losses we have experienced in our lives. The task then, according to Dr. Boss, is to feel, to experience, to let the grief in and know that it won't consume you. We are truly lucky to have this practice of communal grieving. Rest assured that although we are physically separate in our practice this year, there are others watching and remembering and crying with you right now. As this pandemic continues, and as we mourn the losses of this past year, both ambiguous and specific, we will have good days and bad days. The task at hand is to allow ourselves to feel sad, to embrace our sadness for a few hours at a time. We fear sadness, that if we give an inch, it will take a mile. Such mastery is illusion. Feelings come and feelings go. Honor them when they arise with the knowledge that they will pass. Dr. Boss urges us to go easy on ourselves because grief is exhausting. This day of remembrance, allow yourself from the comfort of your own home to let fall the tears as they well up in your eyes. Let's remember and be sad for the loves we have lost, and let's grieve this year for everything else we have lost.